The vault door has opened, and we have stepped into the apocalyptic wasteland of the landscape of the wasteland. Alas, we have been stopped by raiders of the illustrious Bethesda Softworks, led by the dangerous Lieutenant Emil, the pen Pagliarulo, right hand to Todd, the leather jacket Howard. Emil, welcome to Pixel TV.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Emil, I've been doing some research on what you did on the different games, and you kind of like jump between being like a lead senior designer and writer, but you're basically wearing both hats at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been at Bethesda, it'll be 20 years next month, and so over time things sort of get all jumbled together. So my studio title right now is design director, but my project title has varied. So on the Fallout games, I have been the lead designer and writer. On the Elder Scroll, on Skyrim specifically, I was senior designer and writer, and now on Starfield, I'm lead designer and writer again.
My first question is, like, you have been the lead senior designer and writer on numerous Fallout games.
Yeah.
Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Fallout Shelter, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I did all the primary writing on Fallout Shelter too.
But you have also been credited on classics such as my personal favorite expansion pack for Elder Scrolls 3, Blood Moon, Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion, and Skyrim. So, but I mean, before we start with your game design career, I kind of want to take a step back to the younger Emil. I kind of want to, like, the one who might be designing games at this point, but haven't tried working on a Fallout game. So what was your relationship with the first two Fallout games?
So when the first Fallout game came out, I was actually a games journalist before they were called games journalists. I was working for a now defunct website called the Adrenaline Vault, and I was a writer, and then I became the editor in chief. And back then, we used to sort of myself and the other writers would sort of argue a little over who's going to get to review what. And Fallout. There was someone, Jordan Thomas, a friend of mine who I've worked with before. He really wanted to do Fallout, and I remember that. And he ended up sending me his copy of the game. And with a Sharpie, he had drawn like an atomic symbol or a mushroom cloud on it. He's like, "You have to play this game." It's like, okay. And so and I played it, and I was like, what? And it was so different than anything else. And even back then, you could tell that it wasn't. I could tell back then that this is not a game. This is not a game that just comes and goes. This is like the start of something. Like the world was so creative and so unique. I didn't think in terms of IP, but I thought in terms of this is a franchise that's going to go somewhere. There's going to be more of these.
This has legs.
This has legs. Yeah. 100%.
So I mean, in effect, you can answer this for the Fallout games you've also designed. I'm kind of curious what your go-to Fallout character concept is. I had a discussion with my tech guy whose name is Michael at one point where I say I always have like a character concept I usually use. I have like 3 maybe. And one of them is, for instance, like the cowboy, like inspired by Clint Eastwood, like the laconic cowboy type characters. Yeah. Like, do you have something like this when you play Fallout games, something you always is the first character you make?
As a player?
Yeah, as a player.
Yeah, and it's funny because, on Fallout 4, you can see these threads in there. I played Fallout 4 specifically as a detective character. There's always like a film noir detective character, and sort of like the companion to Nick Valentine. That's why Nick Valentine came about, because that's why I created him, because I'm so into that stuff.
Right. Okay. So you're actually the secondary character, and Nick Valentine in your playthroughs is the main character.
A little bit, yeah, in a weird sort of way. And I do different builds. So there's my detective guy. There's usually my big brawler melee dude with a heavy gun, and then like a sort of like sniper type. So those are the 3 different ones. But the film noir sort of detective-y type of one is the one I go towards.
So, I mean, you went from working on, firstly at Bethesda, you went from working on numerous Elder Scrolls titles, and then you went to Fallout 3. So in terms of designing and writing, what did you have to learn, or maybe even relearn, in terms of trying to write for that franchise for the first time?
Yeah, well, so when we had gotten the Fallout IP, and Todd Howard asked me if I wanted to be the lead designer of it. How do you say no to that? And so, really, I knew that we were going to make, we make primarily first-person games. You can play in third person. First person is our primary focus, and third person too, but it's certainly not isometric. And I love first-person games. My first game I ever worked on is Thief, the Thief series. And so, knowing what would Fallout be like in first person. And so, there's an extensive Fallout Bible that was written. And I dove into that. I played the game. I played Fallout 1 and 2 again. I played, Tactics again. And really just trying to figure out, how do we take all this stuff and put it into first person, and trying to figure out for Fallout 3, what characters do we want to reuse? What is cool? What is controversial? And by the way, at the time we did Fallout 3, it was a different time. It was incredibly controversial with Fallout fans. And there was a group of the hardcore Fallout fans, Fallout 1 and 2 fans, did not want us making Fallout 3. Did not like us making Fallout 3. They were mad that we got the license. They were mad that we were making it first person. And so there was a lot to overcome. And so it was a challenge, like a character like Harold. There's a great story opportunity to do something with Harold, but
Harold is the tree, right?
Tree, yeah. And things like that. So it was really trying to figure out, how much of the lore we wanted to use and how much we wanted to create. And when Fallout 4 came around, we felt like we had done the nostalgia thing. And so we were really trying to move the IP forward with.
Right. Okay. I mean, I was personally I've never played the previous ones. I wasn't really into gaming. I think 11 years old in '97 or '98. So I jumped on to Fallout 3 mainly because I was actually a fan of Bethesda games, so I didn't have that kind of relationship of saying I want this isometric kind of feel to it, because I was just like, cool, new.
You bring up a very good point, and because that is certainly something we thought of too. Like, are we making this game for Fallout fans or for Bethesda fans, and trying to please both? And these conversations really came up when we were talking about the Brotherhood of Steel, because the Brotherhood of Steel is, in Fallout 3, the Brotherhood of Steel is they're like an offshoot. They're more noble than they were in the previous games, and we knew that, because we knew that our players would kind of want that and expect that. And so we have the Brotherhood Outcasts, who are sort of more like the old school Brotherhood of Steel, the hardliners, where like Elder Lions and the ones that are in the Capital Wasteland, they're like an offshoot group. They're like actually sort of like not really associated with the main group. And so that was a tricky thing to balance. Whereas in Fallout 4, they're back more like the hardliner stance, a little closer to what they were in 1 and 2.
Maybe also like, I'm going to formulate this as an opinion, but think of it as a question, I guess. So maybe that's also why you moved away from the American West. As far as I remember, the two first Fallout games was in California or around there, and you moved in to the other side of United States in DC, which meant you could also have this breath of fresh air and just play around with some other stuff that you might not see in California. The setting has always been important. It's one of the first things we do when we talk about this. What is the setting? Where is it going to be? And for us, we're a studio on the East Coast. We're a studio right outside of Washington, D.C. And at that time, there were no games. And a lot of this is, this is 2008, Fallout 3 came out. This is around 2005, 2006, we're having these conversations. There was no major video game at that time that had been set in Washington, D.C. So it was ripe for us to use. And we knew that Fallout had these strong Americana vibes.
There was some really strong stuff with the Enclave and the American government, and so we saw the real opportunity to use DC. We know it, we love it, we can, whereas we're not as familiar with the West, and that's been done a million times. Because whenever you think of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, you think of Mad Max or the classic Fallout in the wide open wasteland, and so we wanted to try a different take.
And write what you know, right? I mean, you're around.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I'm not sure whether you would say so, but I mean, Maryland is pretty close to DC.
Yeah, I mean, we're like a 45-minute drive to DC.
Yeah, that's nothing, basically. So, I mean, my next question is kind of like related to this. This is like Elder Scrolls and Fallout universes both have like deep lore. Like, however, like, and pardon me for phrasing it like this, but while like Elder Scrolls is a original Bethesda creation, Fallout was adopted. if you know what I mean, this was adopted, but loved nonetheless.
Yep.
So, like, did that change your approach from a narrative standpoint when you guys started working on the third entry? Like, in terms of, like, you talked about there was a lore book, thick lore book, and what you wanted to touch upon and what you wanted to do different. You already talked about Brotherhood of Steel as an example, but were there other things where you knew, like, we kind of want to go in a different direction and DC can give us that freedom?
As far as the location itself with DC?
Well, basically just like moving things from another place might mean you have like more leeway working within the lore. Like if like things might be different on the East Coast contra the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, it allowed us to, one of the things it allowed us to do is it had not been predetermined. What is DC? So it's, it frees us up to not, crush any existing lore, or we're expanding on it. That's always been important for us, is not, and we have been accused of, retconning certain things for various reasons, and that's an entirely separate discussion. But, we are always really cognizant of, we love the lore. We never want to change the lore. We want to add to it. And so we knew it in DC, we could say, what characters from the old games could have made their way to the East? Like Harold is a good example, or like, what does that say about, and the East Coast is sort of like, the East Coast of the U.S. has traditionally been a hub of immigration, so we have characters like in Megaton and Fall 3, there's Moriarty, he's Irish, and it's like, where does he come from? He has an Irish accent, and an Irish brogue. He's from Ireland, and so what is Ireland like? We never really say, but we want you to think, he came on some kind of, however he got there.
Right. I mean, it's been years since I played Fallout 3, but I had the exact same thought when I played Fallout 4, because there's her name is clipping me now. The Irish companion you can get.
Okay.
Yeah, Kate. And she was like, she has an Irish accent. Where does she come from? How did she get here? Like, do boats still work? Like, is there some kind of infrastructure?
And in Diamond City, there's the Bobrov brothers, who are clearly there. We don't specify, but they're actually, the voice actors were Ukrainian, so they're Ukrainian. And how did they get there? And so the premise is like, boats still work. They came here somehow. What the hell was that transatlantic journey like for them? That's a story in itself, and it's a story you tell yourself in your head, like, how is that possible? Whereas people don't know this, but Alistair Tenpenny from Fallout 3, he has a British accent. That's all. That's fake. Actually, he's pretending to be this.
I mean, I was actually considering like the Bobrov brothers and Kate having come from some kind of insular community in America where that might come from immigrants, and then you just kept the accent.
No, we postulated that they actually came from Europe.
Oh, that's interesting. So I have a small general question. Like, how hard was it?
Problems or questions.
So how hard was it to capture that feel of the satirical 50s Americana that has like this pointedly dark anti-corporate humor with Vault-Tec, West-Tec, Robco, and Nuka-Cola, like when you started working on Fallout 3? I mean, I feel like when you sit down and write, you sometimes have to think, well, I have to go to a specific place to really nail something, and particular when something has already been established to a certain degree?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the humor in our Fallout games has come up before. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. We had this big press event for Fallout 3, and we had a lot of press from all over the world come to our office. And I remember I was in a small room with he was a Russian guy, a really big Russian journalist, and his first words to me were, Fallout 1 and 2 have humor. Fallout 3, no humor. And I was like, whoa. And so, the thing with our Fallout games, I have a very dark sense of humor. I worked that into the Dark Brotherhood stuff I had done in Oblivion. And so the way we have looked at Fallout, like, this is a post-apocalyptic, really effed up universe. You have to laugh so you don't cry at times. So the humor it's really sort of dark humor, like this, at one point you go to a vault and there's a Mr. Handy who's like, I've been successfully performing surgery on all these people, and there's dead bodies and he's covered with blood. And you're like, what is happening? Whereas the older Fallout games, especially Fallout 2, started veering off. The tone was different.
They kind of have like Monty Python references, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's much more like in jokes and references, and we didn't want it. That wasn't the route that we wanted to take, and so we wanted to stick with the dark humor. And like, basically, the game is serious, but it's punctuated by levity here and there, so it's not so depressing all the time. Like in Fallout 4, you have these very serious. You're looking for your son who was kidnapped from your murdered spouse. And at the same time, you find a robot who's trying to get a sailing ship off of the roof of a building.
Or just Codsworth, like, how do you polish rust from a car?
Exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, before we segue into Fallout 4, I've tried to write these like chronologically, and the next question is just like a kind of a small one. Like, for instance, like, how cool was it to have Liam Neeson say words either you or someone on your team actually had written? Like, how cool was that?
I'm glad you asked that question, because that was one of the coolest experiences. Because Todd Howard and I, we got on a train and went to New York, where he did the audio session, and getting to meet him and talk to him, and one of the most surreal experiences. He was recording his holotapes, his audio holotapes, and so we got to sit him. He's sitting in the booth, and it's dark, and he's just recording. He's recording his holotape stuff, and they're words that I had written. And it's like, it felt like your father sitting in the vault recording his holotapes. Like, he was that character at that moment. He's like, my son, I'm so sorry. And I was just like, we're just there like, this is a pro, man. This guy he is not playing a character. He is that character. That was amazing.
I always felt like he was surprisingly good at voice acting. Like, he's done some more in Lego movies where he played like the two cop, and I was actually surprised he was so good. What's funny about it is that you kind of caught him right before he became an action star. I can't remember when Taken was coming out.
Yeah, we definitely did. And we caught him at the point in his career where he was sort of becoming known as the father figure who dies. Right? He was Aslan. He was Qui-Gon Jinn. He was in the Night movie with Orlando Bloom, the Ridley Scott movie.
Oh, right, Kingdom of Heaven. Yeah, I think actually one of his first roles is in John Borman's Excalibur, where he plays Gawain, and then he also dies in that.
You're right, Excalibur, exactly. So yeah.
So next question, like Fallout 3. That came out in 2008, and Fallout 4 came out in 2015, and that had like Skyrim in 2011 in between those releases. Like, what lessons do you take from designing for a completely different franchise or a different universe when you have to dust off the narrative cobwebs and start working on the Fallout franchise again?
Great question, and it's come up because here's the thing. Fantasy writing is so much different, and so it's a challenge for us doing our Elder Scrolls writing, because we're really trying to push our game writing to not be so video gamey and not do the standard things, and there was some of this stuff in Skyrim. Like, for example, right, in Skyrim, you could walk into a place and someone could go, "Hail, stranger! I haven't seen you around here before," and it feels okay. But you go into Fallout and you go into a store and someone's like, "How are you, friend? I haven't seen you around here before." People don't really talk like that in real life. But go into when's the last time you went into a Starbucks and someone said, "Hey, hail, stranger! I haven't seen you around here before." What's your,
Maybe in Canada, who knows?
Maybe in Canada, right? I don't know what it's like. But so it's really trying to get yourself out of that fantasy sort of overly friendly mindset, and really, and the other big challenge for us was Fallout 4 was the first time we had a voice protagonist. So that, for better or worse, that was a huge challenge too.
So there's a very distinctive thematic correlation between Fallout 3 and 4. Like child searching for their father turns into parents searching for their son. So it's kind of it's like two sides of the same coin. Could you talk a little bit about that? Was that intentional, having that thematic correlation from 3 to 4?
It was very intentional. And I remember, at the time, we wanted to tell a story that had some kind of emotional resonance. And, for Todd and I, these were very personal stories. We're both fathers. We both have sons. And, there's something about our relationship with our own fathers in there that there's definitely an exploration of some of that stuff. But, after Fallout 4, I had started joking, where do we go from here? My grandmother was missing. So I think we've done that. And so in Starfield, we looked at that and tried to do something different. But that was definitely intentional, yeah.
So in terms of having the main character being a parent, that means the backstory is much more kind of, I would say, pre-established compared to Fallout 3's grow, because you have that birth sequence and that grow up sequence in the prologue sequence, and then you have somebody who we meet kind of not at the twilight of their years, but they're beginning a new phase of becoming a parent. So that means the main character is much more pre-established in some certain respects. Did that choice give you much more leeway in controlling the overall narrative of the fourth game, where the incentive was linked much more to a parent's responsibility compared to having I love my kid, but kids can be assholes sometimes, right?
True enough.
I feel like Fallout 3, it's kind of more, this is not a criticism, but there's less narrative dissonance of going over to Mr. Tenpenny and blowing the atom bomb because while you're searching for your father, where there's a much more incentive and expedience needed for searching for your son.
Yeah, 100%. And that was definitely a challenge. How do you tell a really meaningful, emotional, compelling story in a world where we want to give the player the freedom to do whatever they want? And so really the challenge is to I've read after Fallout 4 came out there, read some reviews they should have timed the main quest or made or forced you to do it, and we never want to do that. It's the player's game. We want them to play it the way they want. So really it was upon us to make the story and make the relationship compelling enough so that you want to do that. You want to know what happened to your son. So it fell upon the designers. And, I am credited as being the lead writer, but that's a bit of a misnomer. I don't write everything. I come up with the high level story, but, we have our design team who are writers. I will sort of oversee their writing and guide them, but they're doing all the writing. So it's trying to get them and get the whole team to sort of make it good enough that the player wants to do this.
Right.
But it was definitely a challenge.
Right. So also, secondly, having the main character exist before the bombs dropped. Spoiler alert for a 7-year-old game, I guess. That kind of gave them an interesting perspective on the Fallout world overall. For instance, their viewpoint on established factions like the Minutemen or the Brotherhood of Steel. Would you say that it made the wasteland of the Commonwealth seem more tragic, both to the player and the main character, because he was from before the bombs dropped? And did you write Fallout 4 with that in mind?
again, we definitely thought about it. It was another challenge because it was a challenge in how you writing the dialogue in the way you speak to characters, because if someone says, oh yeah, the world got destroyed 200, 300 years ago, and you're like, we have to have a dialogue option there, like, oh, I remember, or like, so trying to like sort of reference the fact that you were around when it happened and you might have knowledge of things. Like, for example, we bring up the Silver Shroud. The Silver Shroud is this radio play. The player's never heard of this before. But the character, so there's a bit of dissonance between the player and the character, where the character has more knowledge of the world than you do. And that was a bit of a challenge, try to like, did he grow up, listening to the Silver Shroud? So I think there's a dialogue option to say that. So we had to constantly keep that in mind when we were doing it.
So I'm going to move to the next question. I'm kind of going to move from the narrative Fallout in some certain respects, because I feel like one of the things that I always go back to in terms of Fallout is because of the settlement system.
Oh yeah.
Which I love, and what I was so surprised about was like that, how it offered like a huge amount of emergent narrative just in the settlement system. Like, I mean, there's loads of YouTubers like Ranger Dave or No Response who made these very intricate, advanced settlements. And by the way, I love the design choice of making junk usable. Like, so you actually have to pick up junk. Yeah. And it gave a lot of freedom to the players and what they were able to build out of the settlement system. Like, was that something you guys anticipated, or were you guys blown away from the creativity and the emergent narrative of the settlement system itself?
I think it was more we were blown away than something we planned for. We thought we wanted to do something, but we had no idea what it was going to become. And it's not just blown away by the fan reaction, it's blown away as we were developing it and seeing what it had become. And we're like, because we had this group that was really into it and they're making it like, this is freaking amazing. And so then the challenge was, how much do we make this part of the main quest? Do we force players to do it? And there's actually a moment very early on in the game that I would, if I had to go back and do something else, we do this thing where, you go to the Museum of Freedom and you meet the Minutemen, and then you have to escort them back to Sanctuary, and that's where the settlement stuff really comes in. And you think that's the main quest because that's the objective that's sort of live, but it's not the main quest. And so players think it's the main quest, and it's really not. And so we never wanted to force the players to have to do that. And sometimes but we do it at some parts. We work that system in, like when you have to make the teleporter to go to the Institute. And if you haven't built stuff, it can be confusing and a little bit hardcore. You're like, oh my God, I have to connect this wire over here. But it's like seeing what it became and how much fans liked it and loved it, it became really instrumental in what the vibe of the game was. And it really led to developing the camp system later on for Fallout 76.
Yeah, and there's also a settlement system in Starfield, which I'm really excited about. Because I love the settlement system. I always build at the Red Rocket truck stop near Sanctuary, and I love doing that. And I always wanted to build, like, after all DLCs were gone or were out, I always wanted to build like a huge ammo factory at the Starlight Drive-In.
Oh, right, yeah.
I felt that was kind of cool, but I've never done it because it takes too much, and I play on survival usually.
Yeah, I'll tell you, my weirdest build that I ever did is, so there's a sort of Irish mafia figure named Whitey Bulger, who in real life, there's a character sort of based on him in the game. I created Whitey Bulger as a playable character, and I made him look remarkably like him. And I didn't. This was not pre-planned. It's just the game allowed me to do this. I was able to basically be a crime lord and go and like I had my different my drug labs around the Commonwealth making drugs, and I would go and make my collections, and like utilizing the settlement system to do that, to be this criminal mastermind. It's really weird.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It was. I was like, wow, I didn't know what to do.
Okay, so I actually have a question about Fallout 76. It's because I recently watched a fun documentary on IGN of all places, where they talked about like the different ways people played the game. like such as legacy weapon traders, like when you guys or when the live team like removed like legendary weapons that were too overpowered, but people who had them still have them, and then they could sell them on. There's like a theater troupe playing Shakespeare in game, and there's a cannibal. Yeah, and there's a cannibal clan, like where you have to get eaten to get in or something.
Yeah.
So when you guys designed the game, was that around no NPCs? Was that the kind of narrative you kind of hope like players would bring to it, like kind of having this creative post-apocalyptic narrative that they would create within it?
Yes, 100%. And so that was the dream, and that was the goal, and that goal now has been realized, but it took a long time for players to get there because the lack of NPCs, it was a huge gamble for us, and I think it was such a shock to players and such a surprise, and we have been known for pushing our quests with NPCs, and we maybe didn't have all the systems in place to allow players to really play, to create their own narratives that we do now. And so that was always the goal, but it was tough getting there and trying to find that balance.
Right. Okay. So I have some. We're almost done. I'm gonna let you off your hook. You probably have a lot of work to do. So I mean, one of the final questions I have, like in addition to, I mean, you've worked on high fantasy. We already talked about Elder Scrolls. You've worked on post-apocalyptic, and right now you're working on Starfield, which is a sci-fi NASA punk franchise. And I know there's a preview, you talked about it previously, that you were a games journalist. And I think there's a preview of The 10th Planet, which was a Bethesda game as far as I remember.
Yeah.
That's circulating the internet. I found it on a Reddit post at some point. But
was it really? I wrote that, right? Yeah.
I think you wrote it. And I was like, is that Emil? Okay, cool. But I mean, do you have a preference in terms of writing? Or is it like one of my favorite fantasy authors says, like Steven Erikson says, like whichever character or genre I'm writing in is my favorite at that time?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it depends. I sort of bounce back and forth. And for me, it's like, the whole write what you know thing is not, it's not meant to just like put you in a box and write whatever and just write the only things you know. I've never been a fantasy assassin, or I've never lived in the post-apocalypse. It's bringing some of your own thoughts and mores and life experiences to the fiction that you create. And so that's sort of whenever regardless of the genre, I like working in all different genres, honestly, and I like the challenge that brings. Like it's a Western, it's this. I don't know that I have a preference. I like the challenge. I like writing fantasy because I like writing fantasy that isn't like the millions of other fantasy things that's out there. I like writing post-apocalyptic stuff that isn't like, your typical
Mad Max, Stalker.
Right, yeah.
So looking into the future where Fallout 5 right now is only a thought in the heads of Bethesda Softworks at the moment, but is there a specific thing that you're looking forward to when you're able to work on another Fallout game?
Yeah, the things I tend to do is I always look at where is it going to be set, when is it going to be set, and the one thing we do when we create a new Elder Scrolls or a new Fallout, our stories, you don't have to have played the previous games. It's not like it's not like The Witcher or Dragon Age where you there's a continuing thread of characters. It's a brand new experience. But what I like to do is I like to see, can I take a character from the past and bring them forward? Are they older? Are they changed? Like Moriarty, the companion in Fallout 4 was a 10-year-old kid in Fallout 3.
Oh, you mean McCready? Yeah.
McCready, not Moriarty, McCready, yeah. Right. And so I like to look at how to do that with those characters, like Dr. Lee is another one. So that's always something I have in the back of my head.
You already like referenced the Institute in Fallout 3 and I can't remember the quest, the Bionic Man in Rivet City, as far as I remember.
Yeah, the Replicated Man. Yeah.
Yeah, Replicating Man. Yeah. So I just have one final question for you. If you could live in any vault from the Fallout games, which would it be?
Any vault in the Fallout games? Wow. Oh boy, that's yikes. Yeah. I think Vault 101 would have been cool until everything went to hell. I think there's really here's the thing. It's hard to say I'd want to live in any of them, because the people who live in them don't know they're part of a giant social experiment. We do. And so we know there's some sinister undertones to all of them. So it's really hard to say, I think Tranquility Lane, Vault 112, that might have been.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I keep going back to, I'm sorry, I can't remember whether that vault is in your game or if it's in New Vegas, but the one with all the Garys.
Yeah, that's in Vault 3. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
Gary.
The Gary Vault. Yeah.
That's it for my questions. I want to thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.